Hello, everyone, and welcome to EcoPsych EXP, where we take a stroll through the forest of eco-psychological themes in video games. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Casey Edgerton, and I am a doctoral candidate at Veritas Graduate Institute. My core message is that video games can and do foster ecological empathy and combat apathy and doomism. I love video games, and I see them as a force for so much good, and I hope that this always comes through in my videos. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the incredible game developer I was fortunate enough to be able to interview for this episode, Kyle Banks. Farewell North is the debut game from Kyle Banks, an Edinburgh-based software engineer with over a decade of experience releasing commercial software. Kyle has been practicing as a hobbyist game developer since 2013, participating in game jams and creating technical tutorials, and after moving to Edinburgh, Scotland from Toronto, Canada in 2019, decided that it was time to create his first proper commercial release, inspired by the beautiful landscapes and folklore of Scotland. Farewell North started as a solo indie project being developed in his spare time, outside of having a full-time job as a software developer. He started development on the game only for the pandemic to hit and find himself in lockdown. Instead of exploring the Highlands with his wife and their two chihuahuas in person as planned, he started to create the game using inspiration from those travel plans to craft the game world. In late 2020, John Konsolakis joined the project as composer. With John on board, they built an intricate and adaptive score for Farewell North that brought the game to a whole new level. I would describe the game as an open-world exploration with a hint of stealth and puzzle elements mixed in. Some games that Kyle took inspiration from include Journey, The First Tree, and Flower. Restore color to the desolate islands of Farewell North, an open-world journey where you play as a border collie on an adventure with his owner through the Scottish Highlands. Explore land and sea, solve puzzles to reveal hidden paths, evade monsters, and free wildlife to bring color back to the world, all while revealing an emotional story about saying farewell. The first question I asked Kyle was, Farewell North beautifully symbolizes healing through the restoration of color. From an eco-psychological standpoint, color returning to nature suggests recovering the intrinsic connection between humans and the environment. Could you elaborate on how you developed this concept and why you chose color as the central metaphor for emotional healing? He replied, the use of color was always intended to reflect how Chesley, the border collie we play as, perceives his human Kaylee's emotional state. When the world is dark and gray, then we know she's not in a great place. And when we're able to bring her some joy, then we get sparks of color. But it's not until we're able to work through her memories and get to the core of the issue that we bring color back permanently. The temporary sparks of color are often, in fact almost always, a result of an environmental interaction, perhaps finding some birds or other animals, which was intended to reflect how nature was something the two of them bonded over. We learned throughout the game that Chesley wasn't always Kaylee's dog. She inherited him and brought him back to her home in the city, which he rejected in a way. It was their shared love of nature that allowed them to bond and form their connection. As this developed, the color became less of a purely visual representation of Kaylee's emotions and more towards what you're describing, where we're starting to see how nature is this common passion of theirs, something they both take comfort and heal in, and how their whole bond is deeply rooted in nature and the islands they grew up in. I then asked, the landscapes of Farewell North are inspired by your personal journey and experiences in Scotland. Ecopsychology often discusses place attachment, a deep emotional bond between individuals and specific landscapes. How has your own relationship with the Scottish Highlands shaped your approach to crafting the game's environment and narrative? The answer: certainly, moving to Scotland was a huge turning point in my life, and the game reflects that in its own way. I grew up in Canada and lived there until I was almost 30, but moving to Scotland somehow immediately felt like home, and I finally felt a sense of place. I had worked on dozens of half-finished game projects before the move, but I think moving is what allowed me to finally see a project through from start to finish, and that's what became Farewell North. So it's no coincidence that the game portrays this deep love for the landscape and culture of Scotland. I feel deeply fortunate to have worked with so many talented people to bring this game to life, who all shared a love of the country. Whether it's our home by birth or we chose to move here, it's something we all shared, and Scotland was at the heart of every decision we made. All of that carried over into Kaylee and Chesley's story as well. with Kaylee having a fondness for the islands where she grew up but choosing to move to the city, while Chesley has a harder time leaving the islands behind. The game's portrayal of Kaylee's grief and Chesley's companionship reflects a profound interdependence. Can you speak more to how you consciously designed gameplay mechanics to highlight this interdependence, not only between characters, but also between humans, animals, and nature itself? What inspired your choice to prioritize environmental storytelling, and what emotional or ecological impacts did you hope players would experience as a result? At the core of this game was the idea that pets often seem to deeply understand us. They empathize with us and support us when we're down, and they celebrate with us when we're happy. I also firmly believe they want to uplift us when we're going through a hard time, and so playing as a dog in this game and having the player in that supporting role, where you're not really playing as the protagonist, was no coincidence. Without Kaylee, I think you're playing a more traditional protagonist role, but by having your human there and having the focus on the story being on her experience, I found we naturally sort of gravitated to more environmental and subtle puzzles that show how Chesley is able to support her. But it's definitely a two-way street. Later on in the game, there are moments where the dynamic shifts and Kaylee is supporting us as the going gets tough, or we're working together to herd sheep or other animals, portraying that bond and companionship that they have together. The fact that Chesley was a working dog is a key element of the story, but it also allowed us to explore a mechanic where the two of them have to rely on one another to accomplish their goals, while incorporating their love of nature and animals into the gameplay. So that was a particular highlight for me, where it felt like all these elements coalesced into something that felt right. I asked, the inclusion of traditional Scottish music like My Heart's in the Highlands by Siobhan Miller significantly enriches the emotional depth of Farewell North. Ecologically speaking, music can deepen our sense of place. Could you reflect on how music influenced your creative process and enhanced the ecological storytelling of your game? Kyle replied, music was always central to the development of the game. The name of the game, Farewell North, actually comes from the line of My Heart's in the Highlands, where the original writer, Robert Burns, said, farewell to the Highlands, farewell to the North, which spoke to that sense of place and saying farewell to the place where we grew up. John Konsolakis, the composer of Farewell North and the one who developed all of the auditory language of the game, was the first person to join the project, and he brought so much to the game. Not just the music, which he did an absolutely phenomenal job of, but he really invested in the narrative of the game and really helped shape the structure. He brought in all sorts of traditional instrumentation and developed audio signatures for each animal, each theme, and each place in the game. So keen-eared players will find all these subtle influences shifting and shaping the music as the game progresses. So over the years, we always knew we'd love to do a rendition of My Heart's in the Highlands for the game, but it had to feel natural, not just a theme song played on top. Eventually, we had the idea to have it be a song that the characters knew, that they had a deep connection to. And this idea that throughout the game, Kaylee is trying to remember the words to the song her mother used to sing. That idea really sparked so much potential for the idea, but we had to find the right singer. Thankfully, we got in touch with Siobhan, and she loved the idea, so we were able to work with her to do our own renditions of the song and incorporate so much of the musical language we had already developed. So that was a really rewarding experience working with her and John, and another one of those moments where all these ideas coalesced into something that just fit so perfectly. You've mentioned the islands themselves function like characters in Farewell North. Could you discuss your approach to giving these islands their distinct personalities, and what messages you hoped players would take away from interacting with them as active participants in the story? He replied, I definitely wanted each island to feel unique, and I realized that structuring them around key phases of Kaylee's life was the best way to do that. So the first island focuses on her childhood and learning about the nature of the islands. The second on her upbringing in the islands and her mother's work as a shepherd, and so on. This gave the islands an identity, but also gave me a structure for introducing new mechanics that related to these themes of the island, and also allowed the mechanics to naturally become more sophisticated. As the themes of the island grew with Kaylee's development from a child into an adult, the mechanics can also increase in complexity to reflect what she's doing at those stages of her life. Continuing on the idea of pets playing a role in our mental and emotional well-being, these mechanics allow us to explore those ideas and how Chesley can play his part as the player character. There's a key moment that I don't want to spoil where Kaylee is going through something difficult, something the player might not want to accept. But the moment doesn't play out as a cutscene. The player has to move forward. They have to accept what's happening just as Kaylee does. It would have been easy to have this be a cutscene and just have Chesley move along, but we wanted the player to be an active part of this moment. And even though the player just has to hold the forward button, I think that's one of the most memorable sections of that island, if not the whole game, because it fits into the story the island itself was telling up to that moment. I asked. The emotional core of Farewell North revolves around dealing with loss. Our relationship with pets and natural spaces can profoundly support emotional healing. How has developing this game shaped or reshaped your own views about the healing power of nature and animal companionship? Can you recall specific moments in your life when a pet played a significant role in helping you or someone close to you through a difficult period, similar to how Chesley aids Kaylee? I would certainly say that this process of creating Farewell North further reinforced these views for me, especially as development became rather overwhelming in the final year and I found myself working virtually every hour of every day. I realized how much I personally needed to get outside, preferably with my dogs, and how even an hour in the woods can completely rejuvenate you. Since the completion of Farewell North and the unfortunate loss of one of my dogs a couple months ago, I've been prioritizing time in nature and making sure to carve out space in my day to get outside. I can't point to any specific moments, but I can certainly say that whether it's a simple reminder to get outside, a companion to lift your spirits when you're feeling unwell, or simply an excuse to be silly, having dogs has been a significant contributor to bettering my life in good times and bad. The relationship between Kaylee and Chesley feels exceptionally genuine, warm, and relatable. Could you share your process for capturing and conveying such authenticity in their interactions, especially given the unique perspective of playing as a dog? A lot of this came down to the voice acting of Kaylee, performed by Joanne Ross. Jo's a good friend of mine. She had never done any voice acting before, but she fully threw herself into the role and brought a wealth of authenticity that I couldn't have achieved on my own. Jo grew up in Skye, an island off the west coast of Scotland, and she was able to bring that experience to the game in the way characters speak to one another, their thoughts and perspectives, and gently correct my Canadianisms, many of which I didn't even realize were there. From a writing and gameplay point of view, we really made sure that Kaylee's relationships were at the forefront of the game. Whether that's her relationship with Chesley, her mum, the islands of Scotland itself, virtually every moment is designed to strengthen the player's understanding of those relationships. And by playing as a dog, we're able to use mechanics like the color restoration and the supportive puzzles to help the player build empathy for Kaylee in order to better understand her journey, as well as Chesley's role in it. I asked, community engagement seems to have played a significant role in Farewell North's development journey, including through YouTube and direct player feedback. Could you talk about your approach to building and involving your community and how their input influenced the final product? Kyle replied, absolutely. Throughout development, I was consistently posting on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Imgur, basically anywhere I could. From there, we built a really amazing Discord community of folks who were interested in the game, wanted to help playtest or translate it, and over the 4 years of development, I was able to get a ton of feedback from all those channels. I can't emphasize enough how different, for the worst, Farewell North would have been if it weren't for the amazing community that sprung up around the game. We were also able to work with the Good API and Eden Reforestation Project to do some good while developing the game. To help keep the Discord community active, we built a mini game on Discord called Color Clash that had teams of different colors competing in weekly games to earn seeds. At the end of each week, we planted trees for each seed held by the winning team, and to date, we've been able to plant over 3,000 trees with our partners, who ensure we're promoting wildlife diversity and providing meaningful wages to the local population. Now that you've successfully launched your first major indie project, how has this experience shaped your perspective on game development? And is there something specific you'd approach differently in your next project based on what you've learned? Involving the community is certainly one lesson that I learned with Farewell North. Not only was the game made much better thanks to their involvement, it also gave me some accountability for the days, weeks, and even months where working on the game just seemed like the most difficult thing to do. At the same time, Farewell North was also far too large of a game for a single developer to tackle. I just didn't really realize how big of a project it was until it was too late, and it really took a toll on my mental health, especially in the final year where I was hardly doing anything but sitting at the computer. Going forward, I'm looking forward to working on some smaller, tighter experiences while still focusing on creating deep, emotional games. It's a tough balance to strike, but I'm really inspired by the movement I'm seeing from many of my peers towards shorter games. Finally, I asked, is there anything else you'd like to share about your process, intentions, or hopes for this game in the future? The floor is yours. He replied, every once in a while I hear from a player through a DM or a Steam review where they tell me that Farewell North really helped them, usually because they've had a similar experience to our characters. These messages and reviews have been the most rewarding part of creating Farewell North, and my only hope for the future is that it continues to find the players who need it. My next project will be more lighthearted, just for my own mental health and a bit of an artistic change, but I really hope to have the opportunity to make something that means so much to people as Farewell North has again in the future. I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Kyle Banks for his time and very reflectful responses. It is so clear to see that Farewell North is a deeply personal and emotive labor of love. Its visuals and score are also absolutely stunning. Farewell North is available now on PC, Mac, Xbox, and Switch. A free-to-play demo is also available, so please check it out and show your support. So, let's take a moment to reflect. Sometimes healing doesn't happen in words. It happens in the quiet, in the way a dog waits patiently beside you, in the rustle of leaves after a storm, in the return of color. Farewell North is a game that understands that grief is not something we solve, it's something we move through. And sometimes we don't move through it alone. We move through it with the help of a loyal companion, the land beneath our feet, and the quiet invitation of a puzzle that doesn't just ask us to solve something, but to feel something. In my conversation with Kyle, what struck me most was his description of color as more than a visual mechanic. It's a pulse, a tether, a way of tracking how open a character is to life again. Color becomes an emotional barometer. And what brings it back? Moments of reconnection, encounters with wildlife, shared time with a dog who sees you more clearly than you see yourself. Farewell North is, in that sense, about the ecosystems we create with those we love, human, animal, and landscape alike. The Scottish Highlands aren't just a backdrop here. They're participants, witnesses, memory keepers. Each island tells part of Kaylee's story, not through exposition, but through mood, topography, and music. As Kyle shared, these aren't generic spaces. They're curated emotional geographies. Childhood, displacement, return. The very idea that place can hold memory, that the land itself changes as we do, is deeply eco-psychological. These aren't just pixels, they're thresholds. Kyle spoke openly about how game development itself became a kind of parallel journey, of being overwhelmed, of retreating from the land, of slowly coming back to it. That honesty matters, because when developers embed their lived experiences into the landscapes of their games, we as players feel that resonance. We begin to see our own stories reflected there. So, if you're watching this and you've been carrying your own grief, your own colorless landscape, I hope this game reminds you you are not walking alone. Nature walks with you, memory walks with you, and maybe healing does too. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Once again, please check out the Farewell North game on a platform of your choice. Until we meet again, please feel so very free to like, subscribe, and share. And as always, thank you so much for being a part of this little ecosystem.